Battlestar Galactica is over, but we have to go fracking down the hatch here on RHAP. We know scripted TV down the hatch to talk about BSG, Battlestar Galactica, Season 3, Episode 5, Collaborators, plus a whole entire web series. The Resistance is what it's called. We've got a lot to do today. I'm Josh Wigler, joined here by my collaborator, as always, the great Mike Bloom, one of my very favorite collaborators in life.
Likewise.
In life.
Likewise, hopefully in afterlife as well. You know, I'd like to imagine that, like, all the people who get publicly executed in this episode, there's a place for them somewhere in the afterlife where they get to collaborate with all the Cylons who have died as well, like they've always wanted to.
We've covered so much territory across Down the Hatch. This is a podcast that launched, if you can believe it, in 2019. We are over 5 years old at this point here on the podcast, going off to kindergarten, Mike. It's
it is weird that this podcast is 3 months younger than my son. So
this podcast
milestones.
This podcast also loves skeletons, and what's odd about that is, I think in all of this time, in all of these years, Mike, have you and I ever speculated on what life will be like for you and me hanging out in the afterlife as ghosts?
I mean, Josh, you and I talked about the last episode of Lost for 8 hours. Surely at that
Did it come up?
There had to have been at least a skosh of afterlife talk in there, considering how prescient and present of a concept it was there.
Well, what do you think in mid-November 2024? Let's timestamp this. Mid-November 2024, Mike. What are we doing as afterlife pals now?
We're talking about Lost 3. Lost 2 already happened. We've already done that at that point. Now they're making Lost 3, and we're talking about, like, all right, we're back from the Software Slump series. Now we're back for the second spinoff, and it's better than ever.
Okay, just to gauge the timeline on this. So it's been 20 years since Lost premiered. Still no sign of a sequel, remake, anything. Let's call it like another 5 years. You want to give it 5 years conservatively?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, look, there was a lot of acclaim built around the 20th anniversary. If there was ever a time to announce something's in the works, it would be around this time.
Okay, so 5 years from now, I'll be 45. And then if we're going to have to wait another 25 years for Lost 3, I hope I'm still here.
Yeah, it will be.
You sure about that?
I think so, because you are a Cylon. You are immortal.
Okay, this is true. All right, well, if I'm not immortal, at the very least, our podcasts
Yes, exactly.
Immortal.
We will live on. People will build effigies that project our voices.
As long as we are podcasting, as long as there are mechanisms with which to listen to them, we shall live forever here on Down the Hatch, where we are talking about Battlestar Galactica each and every week. We're in Season 3. We're midway through the first half of Season 3.
What an odd way to put it.
To say a quarter of the way through Season 3. I just spent a lot of time thinking about mortality, Mike, so I'm a little off my game. Of course, I have seen the show before, but Mike never has, so this is a spoiler-free zone with some Easter eggs here and there for people who have watched all of BSG. We'd love to hear from you. Get your feedback in. Down the Hatch, RHAP at gmail.com. That's Down the Hatch, RHAP at gmail.com. And we're Battlestar Galactica, Down the Hatch, wherever you get your podcasts. Hit subscribe. Tell a friend to hit subscribe. We would love to grow our base of
Tell a collaborator to hit subscribe.
Find a collaborator to hit subscribe with you and collaborate with Mike and I over on Blue Sky, where we are at Round Howard and at a Mike Bloom type, yakking it up on Blue Sky, having a great time talking to the people on Blue Sky, Mike.
Yes. Has anyone done it yet between Blue Sky and Blues Guy? Should we make a new platform called Blues Guy that's just a picture of John Belushi and the Blues Brothers?
Sure. And if we could just like keep you from not interrogating Blue Sky any further and lock it in on the PG Blues Guy, I'm good with that. That works for me.
I think inevitably, if there's another rock to hop to, we've already kind of preemptively done it, right? This is basically right now, the social media landscape is the fleet looking for Earth.
Yes.
Like, okay, we thought we settled on New Caprica. Who's to say what's going to happen? Who knows who's going to come in?
Who knows?
And so we're back on the big G. We're looking for the next big thing. And so who knows? Hopefully everything works out with Blue Sky. If not, Blue Sky might be up for grabs to make
that
you
would
feel
be
less than blue.
Seems like that would be the second Exodus, which is the timeline we are living in.
No, we talked about
here.
the second Exodus last week.
That's right. We're talking about our first non-New Caprica episode. However, there is an entire web series that aired before season 3 premiered that is called The Resistance and spins a yarn about some things that happened on New Caprica prior to the season premiere. And the great team behind the curtain, Ben and Brendan, thank you as always for supplying us with great details about these Resistance episodes that originally aired before the season premiered. And it's basically all Jammer all the time. This is like the Jammer and Duck extravaganza. Folks, if you all wanted to know more about Duck, and if you wanted to find out just a smidge bit more about Jammer, do we have the web series for you?
This is so intriguing to me because it makes both a lot of sense and very little sense at the same time. It does make a lot of sense considering that in the season premiere, we get this big plot point revealed of Duck being like, I'll do it. I'll be the suicide bomber. I've got nothing left to live for. And I'm like, I don't remember I know it's been a while for me, but I don't have much of a recall as to who Duck is. And then we get, the police academy ceremony where Jammer's like, Duck, hey, Duck, what's going on? I just thought this was, oh, hey, we're bringing in sort of like what's his name characters from season 2. No big deal. Little did I realize that, to your point, these are going to be big stars. They're almost like, honestly, Josh, The Departed of BSG, where it's to the point where I kind of wanted to see more of it. I think this was a really interesting kind of moral dichotomy between two guys who do sign up for this very seedy police force for completely different reasons. I think this is also where expectations come in because, of course, the baseline I have to compare it to is Lost Missing Pieces, which is Missing Peaches.
Missing Peaches. Well, we don't need to look very far to figure out.
We know Ray Mullen. We've got those jarred. But for those that don't remember, that was a series of mobisodes/webisodes that aired between seasons 3 and 4. And due to the sprawling nature of the Lost cast, it was very sprawling. It went back to like before Jack wakes up in the jungle to some of the stuff that happens now. It does have like some canonical implications, considering that introduced Neil Frogurt onto the world before he was unceremoniously killed off. So I think maybe I was expecting, when you told me about a series of webisodes, I thought, okay, these are all going to be like 2 to 3 segments covering different parts of what's going on with the people stranded on New Caprica.
Sure.
That was not necessarily the case. It was one entire through line, which I guess is closer to what webisodes kind of were back in those days.
Yes. So that, in my memory of the, because this is not the only web series that Battlestar Galactica does.
What?
I didn't remember this one is to the point of this is not the only Battlestar Galactica web series that we encounter. So we will encounter future webisodes as we continue along down the path. And my memory of it, though, at the very least with one of them, in fact, I do believe with both of them, I think there's only 2 left. The team behind the curtain can correct me, not counting Razor or another movie that is set. We'll watch that towards the end of the line.
Oh yeah, I forgot that we have like actual movies.
We've got stuff to do. We got tons of stuff.
Look at BSG, it's doing so much multimedia.
BSG is going to keep us online in a way that Lost never really could, with just like a couple of ancillary things that I think are really, really fun for us to examine. But those web shows also have a through line. So that is how they do it instead of the Missing Peaches. It's not as anthological. So we're dealing with Duck. We're dealing with Jammer. We're going to yada yada it because we've got so much else that we need to talk about today. We can post the YouTube link to the Resistance webisodes in the
it's
show
like 25
notes.
minutes long. I assume that every time they cut to black, that was like the end of a webisode, which is wild. I'm not sure the frequency with which these release, but these are like 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes each.
Yeah, it's lengthy. So looking into it, the first webisode was released on September 5th, 2006. with 2 subsequent webisodes posted to the site. It was on, I think it was on Sci-Fi. It was on Sci-Fi's channel. 2 subsequent webisodes posted to Sci-Fi every week through October 5 to lead into the season 3 premiere.
Oh man, how starved were we for content back in the day when it's like, oh, I can't wait to log on to sci-fi.com and watch a 2-minute video of Duck and Jammer. That'll get me my BSG fix for the week.
Yeah, that's hard. Still not the worst offender. My beloved Walking Dead, and certainly Fear the Walking Dead. They used to have some ruthlessly bad web shows. There was one about an airplane. Like,
I heard about this one. Yeah.
And then like episode 2 was like, I'm like, that guy is really taking his time in the bathroom on the airplane, and I'm here watching it, being like, give him a moment. And then like next week he's a zombie. You know, it was really rough. It was pretty rough. So this show basically chronicles 2 of the characters who we've met to some degree, and we're focusing on to some degree in these first 4 episodes. Duck, obviously, rather quickly, he is more centrally located in the season premiere, but Jammer has been really involved in the show for the last few episodes. His involvement, spoiler alert, if you only watched the web episodes for some reason, it's going to end this week here.
Yeah, I was going to say, you guys are incredible at what you do, curating and cultivating where to put these things. I was thinking initially, like, oh yeah, you just put it because we're officially leaving on New Caprica, and now we can sort of flash back to how we got here. Not realizing that this was arguably a Jammer flashback episode before his death in the first 5 minutes of episode 5.
Yeah. So this again, it airs before season 3, and there was a world in which we could have watched it and then watched season 3. But I thought it would be a real shame. Shame is the word that I was trying to say. Shame.
Ian
McShame.
I just got a title for our Deadwood podcast.
And Ian McShame. Not bad. Not bad at all. Are we too dumb for Deadwood? We might be.
I've never seen it, so.
Very good. I thought it would have been a shame if that's how you went into New Caprica. I think it's fine, it's totally fine, but I think it's much stronger if you walk in and there's Colonel Ty without an eye. These web episodes don't even go into that at all.
Oh yeah, that's the thing, is that we're on day 67, I think, post occupation. So we're really seeing like the beginnings of it. The Resistance is still trying to recruit people. To your point, we still have a clean-shaven Ty. We still have a bearded Tyrell before he ends up nonsensically shaving last episode. So yeah, it definitely feels like, I mean, it's also interesting to see like who they end up getting for this. Like they get Michael Hogan, they get Chief Tyrell. Anders is not there though. He only gets mentioned off screen, despite him being one of like the big 3 that are leading.
Maybe this was the other thing. I mean, Sam Anderson in this episode is like all about like quitting stuff, right? He's like, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. Maybe he would have. He was like, I'm not doing a web show. I just won't.
I mean, maybe he read the season 3 script. He's like, wait, you break me up with Starbuck 5 episodes in after we have like 2 scenes together? Nope, I'm not doing your silly little webesodes. You don't respect Sam Anders.
You don't respect me at all. So like none of that stuff is really in here. It really is. It's the story of Duck and his wife, who gets killed when the Cylons raid a temple that they've constructed in the town in the colony.
Because the Resistance has decided to hide a weapons cache there. That the Cylons are coming in and busting up anyone who's been hoarding them, and so they're like, well, the temple's sacred and like not really touched by the opposition. It's the one place where they can't get to us, so let's hide it there. And Nora's in the wrong place at the wrong time, Josh. If she hadn't gone back for that damn celery, she could still live to see the day.
It's a celery stalk that kills her, by the way. And I'm not here to judge. Like, these people are under extraordinary oppression. Their circumstances are horrific. It's just like it's chewy water, and like that's what you're getting yourself killed over. Maybe they had peanut butter somewhere, and so we need a vessel, we need a vehicle.
Yeah, how can I make ants on a log without one of the
without the log?
Without the log,
I can't make ants on a log without the log. It just doesn't make sense.
So we get like Duck's tragic backstory, right? That he's like, because we find this out in the first episode of like what they did to Nora. So it's again interesting, reverse chronologically, that the second we see Duck like arm in arm with this woman Nora, it's like, oh no, we know what's coming. And what's also interesting is, So Nora was also in the military, right? We know that Duck was a Viper pilot. I'm not sure what Nora was. If
She
she
looked
was,
like she was a pilot, like maybe Raptor,
so then,
maybe Viper. I don't know.
why does Duck get a call sign, but his wife doesn't? Unless her call sign was Nora.
Maybe it was Nora. Yeah.
She's like, I'm a big fan of The Leftovers.
Or it's possible that like Nora is like groundbreaking in the sense of like if they like tried to call her like, all right, celery stalk, let's go for a ride. And she's like, I'm Nora. You're not calling me that.
Yeah, exactly. Like she was truly being the game changer, the pioneer of like, you can't call us by our call signs anymore, but what you can call her is DOA. And so meanwhile, you've got Jammer, who's having his own bit of a moral quandary because surprise, surprise, he's not particularly happy that the Cylons went and open fired upon a temple. You know who is? Colonel Ty. Colonel Ty is totally about this like, as we've talked about before, and this will translate a bit to the episode as well, this idea of sometimes sacrificing things for the greater good. That it's okay, we kind of want to spread the anti-Cylon message when we bait them into basically killing innocent people at a temple. That is bringing people behind our cause, and we can do, this can allow us to do what we want and get the popular support that we need. But the breaking point for Jammer is when they come up with this plan, which I don't know if they go through with, of like experimenting with explosive materials across the street from a hospital.
Yeah.
And just goes to show, even before losing the eye and losing his wife, Colonel Ty maybe not the most empathetic person in the world, considering he was going to risk blowing up a hospital.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Colonel Ty, he's a wartime commander, right? Sort of like how Tom Zarek is a wartime president. So he's willing to carve off pieces of himself in order to get this done. What's the point at this point? They've already carved out his eye. Great line about his eye. Coming up, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. Like, did you see my has hold up a wanted poster? Have you seen my eye?
I'm missing something. Yeah, so good. Oh my God,
Yeah,
Ty is incredible in this episode.
But that's going to push Jammer into really feeling like, am I on the right side here? And he is really drinking the Kool-Aid that, okay, with the new Capricorn police force, it'll allow the Cylons to get out of the streets. It'll allow us to police themselves. And so he ends up getting taken in. He doesn't necessarily volunteer himself initially, but of all the people to make the pitch, again, they sort of grab the actors who maybe were fine with signing up to do this in between seasons. Unfortunately, your Trisha Helfers, your Lucy Lawlesses, your Dean Nordises, they're not going to necessarily, Dean Stockwells are not necessarily going to get in on this. So here comes, really for the first time, doing anything meaningful besides yelling at Gaius Baltar with a gun pointed at his head. Here's Aaron Doral to come and give the winning pitch to Jammer about why he should join their side.
And I didn't really even understand it. I guess like the winning pitch to me, Mike, seemed to be that like Aaron Doral is like, you and I, we're not so different. And Jared's like, never thought of it that way.
I mean, what it really
That's really kind of it.
I think it's less about the pitch, Josh. I think it comes down to the juice.
Yeah.
Because Aaron Doral has this like grapefruit colored bottle of something. And
he has like a watermelon juice.
He says that juice comes from a farm upstate that's definitely real, where humans and Cylons are working together hand in hand. That can be our future if you join our side. And it's enough to convince Jammer to come over there.
Yeah. He's like, you know what? It's not always the case, but in this case, perhaps the juice is worth the squeeze of joining up with the Cylons. It's really tasty stuff. And imagine the jam he could have made from it. So this is really a no-brainer for Jammer to sign up. But like he's at first he's like, I'll never join you. And then eventually by the end of the episode, like he kind of just decides he's going to do it.
Yeah, he decides that he has this like little secret chip as a signal, and so he's going to walk off to do that. And then at the same time, again, what makes this actually more of an interesting concept on paper than I would have thought is that Duck agrees to basically be a mole as well.
Yes.
That he's like, I've signed up for the new Caprica police force, but don't get anything twisted. I want to get on the inside and figure out like who was able to bust up the temple to kill Nora. And so as much as I maybe lampooned in the premiere, like, how did Duck get into the police academy so easily that he was just able to, like, sneak in there for the graduation? It does appear this was more of a deep-seated thing than initially expected. And then, yeah, as I mentioned before, like, they low-key end up doing a Departed storyline before The Departed happens, or at least the American version of it, that made me kind of wish for, I don't know, whether like an AO3 fan fiction was written about it or they produced more episodes to have like the two of them consistently circling each other and like them both trying to figure out who the mole was on the other side. Ship it up to New Caprica.
Ship it up to New Caprica. Oh, I'll ship it up to New Caprica. Yeah. Wow, The Departed with BSG characters. I mean, I think that they kind of tried that, and it was called Black Market. Oh
God, yeah. All right, maybe we avoid that.
This is, I guess, like, a satisfying web show if then the very next thing you see is an episode of Battlestar Galactica in which Jammer is part of the police and Duck kills himself and the rest of the police academy, or most of them anyway, as the final note of the season 3 premiere. But other than that, I don't think that this would have been useful to watch first for our purposes at least. But what do you know, Mike? It turns out to be a really great segue into the actual episode that we are here to talk about, Collaborators, which is the 5th hour of Battlestar Galactica. And I guess it airs, like roughly 20-ish days after the web series concludes. So Jammer's plight is still fresh in the mind for those people. And he is very fresh in the mind for us, because this episode, the first one, set entirely with the fleet again, having left New Caprica, begins with an execution squad featuring Colonel Ty, Chief Tyrrell, Sam, and these people named Connor, who I want to talk about, Celix, who we've talked about in the past, and Gene Barrelay, who I don't think we've ever talked about before.
First off, Gene Barrelay sounds like the name of like
an Arrested Development character.
or like a personal attorney or something. Like, have you been personally wronged by the Cylons? Call Gene Barrelay. I'll get you the money you need.
Gene Barrelay has to be in The Good Wife. That has to be a character that exists somewhere.
I think she's in like the 4th spinoff from it. Yeah, is the Adventures of Gene Barrelay.
We've had a decent amount of Gene Barrelay on this show already. She is one of the pyramid players for the Caprica Buccaneers, who came here via Sam Anders.
So I was wondering that. I was thinking, like, okay, there's a chance
I called Sam Anderson before, by the way. That's Bernard, and imagining Bernard as this character, incredible.
Starbuck, I don't know. But I do think that would be, I mean, I was thinking about that because I thought, okay, maybe there's a chance this is one of the Caprica pyramid players. And if so, where is Morris Fink?
Yeah,
where's my boy, the MVP of the Caprica City Buccaneers? Did he survive the exodus off the planet? I certainly hope so. I hope he's living in a farm upstate, making all the juice that he wants to. Pour one out for Morris Fink.
Morris Fink. Yeah, I remember him. Does the show? Another question entirely. The show remembers Jammer.
Morris Fink is really the Nora, where like everyone else had nicknames except for Morris Fink.
No, Gene Barrelay doesn't have a nickname either, unless like she got her last name from her signature move when she would play Pyramid, and Sam would go, "Gene, do a Barrelay."
And what does she do? Just get on the ground and roll over people?
Yeah. She just lays on top of people and knocks them down.
There's no rule against it.
No rule against it. It's Jammer. Jammer is this person that this execution squad is bringing to like an airlock, like a launch pad for a Viper in the, I mean, what is day, what is night? But like the vibes are in the dead of night, right here, to bring him here. And they have evidence against Jammer that he worked with the Cylons to carry out raids against the Cylon population, including a raid on the Temple of Artemis that killed 23 people.
But this is not the one that's referenced in the web. Because they were talking about, obviously we'll talk about this doucheroonie Connor and like, my son died because of that. And like Jammer did not join the police force at that point. The police force wasn't a thing. So I guess this is something that happened in the interim. But yes, so this is like a secret cabal almost formed known as the Circle. Message! You're dead.
Yes.
Skull emoji, robot emoji.
Yes. It's very similar to that. Jammer is trying to be like, I'm not such a bad guy. I helped save Callie. Chief, you remember that? Callie was running. Well, guess who set her free? It was me, Jammer. Then this guy, Connor, says, okay, well, if that's true, does that make up for the fact that you definitely got my 7-year-old son killed?
His name was Kevin. He was 7.
He was 7. And I believe it's Colonel Ty who tells Chief, like, answer the question. Like, is our 23 lives versus Callie? How does that shake out?
The ultimate trolley problem.
And Chief ultimately, with like great resignation, kind of has to settle on, no, saving Callie doesn't get him off the hook. He and Jammer, it seems like in the web show, like it makes it seem like they were relatively tight. I think like
well, remember that Jammer was a deckhand, so like, and we talked about in previous seasons how Tyrell basically
he looked out for his
like
guys.
A family.
He looked out for his guys. I think,
including sleeping with one of them.
I think that even here he's trying to like figure out, is there like any, like, I think the Chief of the end of the episode really shows you earlier here that like he's looking for a reason not to do this. He doesn't want to do this.
Yeah, whereas like him and Connor, I think, are on stark oppositional sides of how to approach this, which is Connor is basically just saying, burn them all.
Yes.
Anyone who consorted with Cylons is a dead person.
Yeah.
Whereas Chief's like, there's a lot more moral gray here, and we should not take the fact that some people had to do what they felt they needed to survive to mean that they shouldn't survive any longer.
Yeah. It's interesting, by the way. I said that we would talk about Connor, who is not a character that we have seen before on Battlestar Galactica. However, the actor who plays him, Ryan Robbins, we have seen on Battlestar Galactica before. He has played a different character on the show. Did you know this?
No. Was he...
Is he not recognizable to you?
Oh no. Who? I'm trying to think as to who he would be. I guess maybe one of the civilians? Like, was he involved in the skirmishes in the beginning of season 2?
If I told you that Connor, Charlie Connor is his name, as played by Ryan Robbins, if I told you that that is the very first human you see in Battlestar Galactica, would you believe me?
Is he the guy that's sitting at the desk waiting for the Cylons to come? I thought that was like an old man.
He is the Armistice Station officer.
Oh.
He is indeed an old man that they put old man makeup on.
No! What?
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 Yeah.
That's the very first thing you do with your miniseries, and you're like, I don't know if we can cast an actual old man. I got this guy, Charlie Connors. I think he's going places.
Maybe
let's just put him in some old age makeup.
That's Ryan Robbins. Charlie Connors, the character. Armistice Officer is his original character, according to Battlestar Galacticast, as transcribed by the great Brendan Fitzpatrick. Trisha Helfer tells a story that Ryan Robbins, who plays Connor in this episode, was actually in the miniseries as a different character in old age makeup, playing the Armistice Officer who smooches and then blows up. If you line them up, you can tell it's the same person, but the producers brought him back because they liked him. My question is Mike's question is like, you didn't have a, like, why are we Colin Farrelling the Armistice Officer? The Armistice Officer doesn't need to get penguined out over here.
There's a wealth of old white men.
There's a lot of old white men looking for work, frankly.
That's exactly it. They're waiting in line at Central Casting. And I don't know what Ryan Robbins had over them, but Ryan Robbins Riz. Now it leads me to believe that this show might just have a surplus of like makeup budget that they
Yeah.
need to spend every season, which is why they put Jamie Bamber in the fat suit, which is why they're
Sure.
like, shit, okay, we need to spend $300,000 more dollars. All right, yeah, come here. We're gonna put you in old age makeup. We need to spend the money or else they take it away from us.
Maybe and I like mean this like half jokingly, half seriously, maybe the move was, here's what we're gonna do. First human on the show. I don't know why this is my Ron Moore voice, I guess. First human on the show. We're going to put him in old age makeup to see if the audience can tell. And if the audience figures it out on a show where we have to hide identities, we're screwed. But if the audience never knows, then we've sold them so effectively on the fiction that we could do anything. So maybe it was the Ryan Robinson Kobayashi Maru.
Yeah, this could be the first test.
This was a test.
I mean, what they should have done.
Did you pass the Ryan Robbins test or did you fail and I think we failed the Ryan Robbins test, which is a win for Battlestar Galactica.
Are we? Okay. Well, now this goes back to my theory about who was the mysterious man on the cover of my Blu-ray case. Once upon a time, I said that it was Saul Tigh after he got facial reconstruction surgery when a Cylon sat on his face. Maybe it is Saul Tigh, and Michael Hogan was actually in his 30s, and they just put him in old age makeup for the entirety of the show until a certain point. What they should have done is, if they want to make him an old man, have Six kiss him and have her like suck the vitality out of him, where he turns into an old man.
Yeah. Have you looked recently at the Blu-ray cover? Do you have it handy?
I don't have it handy. No, not with me.
I was gonna say, all right, so you don't have it handy, but let's just like pull up a picture of Charlie Connor real quick. I'm gonna put this in the chat here. This is from the Battlestar Galactica wiki. Just based on memory, it's like him. He's like kind of like 5 o'clock shadow, hair kind of long,
yeah,
brown.
It looks like he's trying to do like Sawyer cosplay to the best of his ability.
Brown hair, super white dude. I don't have the Blu-ray in front of me, but brown hair, super white dude sort of describes that character on the Blu-ray cover. Is this the same guy?
No, it's all about the hair length. Like, unless this guy majorly gets a haircut, it's not him. That guy is also in a military uniform, and I guess we did see Gata return to duty, but like, I don't know if this guy is part of the military at all, so I don't believe that it is Connor.
Okay. Connor for real. It is not Connor for real. Anyway, they kill Jammer. They send Jammer out the frackin' airlock, and there is a really like a rather fracked up final scene for Jammer, I think, where like they leave Jammer tied up. They leave them. They like solidify him in the airlock. He's gonna get blown out. There's like a window that separates so that they can like still see each other. Jammer walks to the glass and we can't hear him, but
and he
he's
puts
like,
up his hand.
Not Connor's face on the Battlestar Galactica Blu-ray collection. We don't know what he says, but it like you can imagine some of it like, I'm sorry, please don't. But then he just gets annihilated, blasted out into the winds. Really messed up death scene.
Well, especially because, not to say that, like, again, that's the great thing about the show, is that everyone is kind of morally complicit in some of the things that they get involved in. But again, having just checked out the webisodes and like seeing the path that Jammer took, which is him feeling like he wasn't necessarily with the good guys, considering the things they were able to do and the human lives they were willing to expend to help their own cause. Like, to then track that immediately into his death, and him, I think, truthfully saying, like, I was thinking, I thought I was doing this for the best reason. I was just trying to help people. It is pretty tragic to watch. And again, I really, really like this episode. And I think part of it is because, like, looking at the perspective of the Circle, I mean, this episode shouldn't be called Collaborative. It should be called Hurt People, because you really see how a good amount of them, in the wake of what they experienced on New Caprica, causes them to just exterminate human lives. And to get a full glimpse as to like kind of the beginning and end of Jammer's arc in a back-to-back viewing experience, I really enjoyed.
There's a lot in this episode. It is a really great character episode. I think it advances the themes of this show very beautifully. Is this like a massive episode for like the world building of the show? Not necessarily, but I think it really does tremendous work at once again taking these characters who were largely back burner characters until this season when they had to step up and be the main characters of the show, as we talked about last week. This is another really, really good episode for all three of Ty, Chief, and Sam. And I think like seeing the ways in which these three resistance leaders are now coping with life after the war, basically. And they're on different points on that journey throughout the episode. The two opposing poles, I think, are Ty, who's old and has been through so many wars and has lived through such tenuous peace times that he's just like that Ellen died and that he let that happen, if not outright killed her, that he lost an eye, that he lost everything. And at this point can still do his job in his estimation, but can he without revenge in his heart, right? The question between revenge and justice, as Laura Roslin will lay it out. On the other side is Sam, who has also been through his fair share of wars. He fought 2 ground wars against the Cylons.
Right.
And it's, he's a very interesting parallel for a certain kind of American right now, I think, where it's like, okay, well, I went through that before. So can I just have a beat to process that I have to do this again?
Yeah.
And like on the other side of that, here comes Sam being like, this isn't what I signed up for. Like I want to move on. Like I want to like that's done. It's a miracle that it happened twice, that we were able to get out of it. And I'm done. I'm not doing this kind of thing. I'm meting out justice, sure, but I'm done with like revenge. In the middle, somewhere between those points, is Chief, who is often the moral compass of this show.
Yeah.
Who is watching and participating in the executions as legal as they are. It can be legal, but is it ethical? Is it right? And Chief is really struggling with that. Where does it land when it comes down to like people who are righteously angry, who lost everything, who lost who lost eyes, who lost children, who lost their entire worlds? How does Chief square that, finding justice for that, without letting the vengeance that is rightfully born, like the instincts of vengeance that's rightfully born from those feelings, from those experiences? How does he like keep that at bay? And can you keep that at bay? Can you keep the personal out of this? And Chief doesn't have a great answer for that for much of the episode, but it builds to this incredible place, starting here with Jammer and ultimately landing with Felix, that I think that this episode just like is demonstrating that they're really invested in the emotional truth of Battlestar Galactica, both for the thematics, but specifically for their characters. I think if you're watching this season and tracking like who are like the really important characters on the show, clearly the show 5 episodes in has like labeled these 3 people as like really important people to be invested in. And I think they've done a really terrific job.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, I even spoke about this last week. I think it was also very natural for them to kind of stop down and take an episode to say, yes, we want to move propulsively forward, but like we have a lot that we need to unpack. I think it's very interesting that like the Adamas take a major step back in this episode in terms of airtime. Laura Roslin's going to have her own sort of moment where she steps up. And I think this show has done a really nice job in the season 3 of providing a really great balancing act, to your point of not only fleshing out these more tertiary characters into the forefront, but now sort of making sure that they stick. That it's like, hey, we were down with them on New Caprica. We're not necessarily going to have them just go off into the background for the time being. Now, look, as always, there'll probably be ebbs and flows of these characters, especially with the circle now like officially shut down. But I think it was just such a natural point to follow up on. And yeah, it goes back to this idea. Maybe it's because I have Penguin on the brain, but almost like the ending to the Batman, right? Where the big moral is that when Batman stands for this idea of justice and vengeance, that can be weaponized in a very, very bad way by someone who feels wronged. And that's what basically last episode, right, it was talked about how one of the reasons why, the Cylons wanted to broker something was because they wanted no more blood for blood. They didn't want to continue this perpetual cycle of killing each other over and over again. And the cycle continues here. And it's not even blood for Cylon blood here. It's humans committing fellow atrocities onto humans because of what they perceive to be their connections to the Cylons. So it's this idea of like, well, we can't take it out on the Cylons, so we need to take it out on somebody. And so we're going to take it out on, as we'll experience with Starbuck and Andros, kind of like the people that are the next closest to us.
And what does she say? Like, Cylons. He'll do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which is, it's tough. It's as we'll talk about with the LVP section, it's a tough look for a lot of our characters. But that said, especially from a modern day lens, where I think we do experience so many tragic and traumatic stories on television nowadays, there is a lot of like sympathy there as well of like, okay, you could understand why Starbuck starts like kicking Gata when he's down because she didn't get the answer out of him that she wanted because she's clearly using this as more so a tool for her to get out her aggression more so than actually going after Gata.
Right. So it's, a lot of the characters are just being explored with incredible finesse in this episode, I think. Just like a really, really, I think a really, really terrific episode of the show. Okay, so and Jammer's, we just got Jammer killed, and that's it so far. So we got to speed it up. Chief's gonna go to Callie and be like, "Hey, someone get you out of there." She's like, "I can't remember." "Oh yeah, actually, yeah, someone did." It's like, you can't remember that? And then she's like, "Wait, why do you know that?" It's like, no reason. Go back to sleep. Okay. Callie goes back to bed. That's the Callie scene.
Yeah, and Tyrael's like, "No, what have I done?"
Yeah. Would it have been enough though? It seems like still no.
No, because I think Tyrael, as you talked about, is a man of moral instincts. And so I think even for him, if it was confirmed that like, oh, he helped save my wife's life, he really couldn't look himself in the eye and be like, yep, my wife means more than this 7-year-old child and 22 other innocent people. The math ain't mathing.
Math ain't mathing. In the pilot barracks, Sam sees Starbuck, tries to give her a little smooch. She's not going in for the smooch right now.
Trouble in paradise, which again is understandable. Starbuck, much like what happened with the farm, right, is living through this incredibly traumatic experience that she has just escaped from. And, we'll talk about in the deleted scenes about like how she chooses to cope with that. But she is back to her like usual stubborn, belligerent self. But this feels very different from comparison to seasons 1 and 2.
She's been through something really, really, really hard. So yes, that's weighing for sure. On Colonial 1, Zarek is like, okay, so it's the do-si-do. You know the do-si-do? Like, we're basically going to do that. Or like, I'm the president, I'll make you vice president. When you're vice president, I'll resign. You'll be president, and you can make a vice president. And she's like, and I'll make you vice president. He's like, yeah, and then I'll be vice president.
I mean, this is government bureaucracy in a nutshell that they have to go through.
Only slightly less confusing than American politics.
Yeah. And like, I guess they'd rather not just do like the kangaroo court. Like, yeah, basically this is what it's going to be from now on. They have to go through the whole rigmarole of going through all this. But we talked about this last time or a couple episodes ago that the unlikely alliance between Zarek and Rosalind, strange bedfellows, now that they have survived their own traumatic incident together, it seems like she does indeed want him. Look at this, Josh, going all the way back to season 1 when they were pulling out an 11th hour Hail Mary of having Gaius Baltar come on as the vice president to prevent Zarek from becoming the vice president. Now they got to the outcome at the end of the day because Zarek himself is like, yeah, this ain't for me. I want more of an involvement in it. But at the same time, basically, I know you're Adama's girl. And without the military at my back, I am no good right now.
So he, yes, all of the things that you've said, there seems to be something of an armistice not played by Ryan Robbins between Rosalind and Zarek right now. So interesting. We'll see that play out further in this episode and see how much she comes maybe to regret deciding to align herself with the infamous Tom Zarek. We get a really intense scene when Gata, in civilian clothes, arrives at the CIC because of all of the gear that's been destroyed in the rescue effort. And Gaeta obviously knows the CIC quite well. He's going to help with the repairs. Colonel Ty does not like that. He says, "Oh, so you can collaborate with Cylons and kill thousands, but the moment the Admiral wants his phones fixed, all's forgiven." And he gets really into it with Hilo. Hilo says, "We're going to need every hand if the Cylons find him." And Ty says, "The Cylons did find us, and Gaeta was on the welcoming committee." He hates Felix Gaeta because Felix Gaeta is a collaborator, and Ty is having a real meltdown over it. And in walks Adama.
Who is usually the cooler here, right? Is usually able to talk Ty down. We've seen this from the very beginning of things. Does not work this time.
No, like the old tell old Bill routine does not work this time. This time, instead, like Ty is not going to be cooled down. And he tells Ty, "You're embarrassing yourself." Ty's like, "I'm not the one who should be embarrassed." Ty has lived, both Adama and Ty have lived through something awful here.
Yep.
Ty had to physically experience it in a way that Bill did not have to. And so like the level of trauma that exists with Ty is just like a burning fire that can't be put out.
That's exactly it. Because it really is. And I'm really glad that they have the character vocalize this later in the episode to like really lampshade it and make it explicit, is this idea that the reason why he has such like, for lack of a better term, kind of a raging hard-on to take out all of the Cylon sympathizers is because of what he had to do to the person he loves most in the world when he found out that she was collaborating with them in more ways than one. Like that has completely removed any sense of sympathy, empathy, and arguably humanity, in a manner of speaking, that he has towards anyone who worked with the Cylons. Because listen, if he couldn't open up his heart to his own wife when she was making arguments as to why she had to collaborate with the Cylons, then why the hell would he open his heart up to Jammer, to Gaeta? And so he comes in from a very specific perspective that I think is a little different from Connor, right? Because we'll actually see a scene coming up where Connor's like, "Yeah, burn them all. They all must die." And like Ty actually comes after him being like, "Nope, we have a code. There needs to be evidence, etc." So he's not like completely hard-lined from that perspective, but it is incredibly, even more so than Starbuck, for certain, that he is bringing a lot of what happened to him personally into this to enact an agenda, or at least to be like, you know, of the judges on this court here to determine execution. He is like far and away the most conservative besides Connor, considering that from his own life experience, he has no amount of feelings to help anyone necessarily survive.
Yeah. So we get that scene. We go back to the circle. They meet again. They're trying to figure out who to send a message to.
It also should be noted, I guess it's Zarek who had like founded this committee behind the scenes.
Yes.
They had to get it done quick. They have 3 days to execute everybody on their list, which is like almost 60 people.
Not a thing that you get on the first watch of the episode, but when you reconsider it and you know by the end of it that this is all Zarek's call, official, sanction as president, then this makes a lot of sense. Where it's like we only have a little bit of time before he's gonna have to before this is not like if someone asks you, "Is it legal?" Like right now we can say yes. But tomorrow, Newt Gunroy, I'm afraid that the answer is no.
Right. It's very much the purge of like, listen, anything can happen right now. It's 3 days of lawlessness. And then once Laura Roslin takes over, we're trying to wipe our hands clean of this entire operation. And the second she'll find out about it, she'll shut it down.
For sure. They start to talk about Gaeta. And Ty says, like, "I don't want to do this, but, he was like family to me. But being chief of staff for Gaius Baltar should be enough to convict on its own."
Not only that, Ty's making a lot of suppositions saying that he was the brains behind Baltar, that Baltar was just sort of this like, I mean, he was from a certain perspective a bit of a shadow puppet president, but it was more so at the behest of the Cylons than Gaeta, who was trying to undermine him from what we saw. But again, this is also a very fun and unfortunately salient theme as well about like, what can get lost in the nuances and how if you come in from a certain perspective of like, well, you were working as part of his cabinet, therefore you were just as in bed with the Cylons as him, that obfuscates a lot more nuances and things that Gaeta was actually doing, which we'll talk about. Like, Was Gata trying to claim this to anyone but Starbuck? Has he been going around talking about the dog bowl, or is it
No,
just
it doesn't
like,
seem like it. No.
which is just, I don't know. If I was Gata, I would want to do that immediately, knowing
Well,
that they're probably become, even if they weren't coming for my head, there'd be a lot of eyes on me. I'm the only surviving member of the Baltar administration on the Big G. I feel like I would want to explain things immediately.
I think Gata's specific form of trauma explains to me why he doesn't, which he seems really, like melon balled out, right? Like he's been like shelled out. So there's a lot to talk about with Gata. I think there's just so much to talk about in this episode. It's so dense. Like Ty, putting Connor's head on the table and saying this is about evidence and justice, not feelings. And then in the same breath, like saying something that's based really just on feeling and anger towards a former close colleague. He says everyone knows Gata was the brains. Like that's not based on any fact. Like you don't have any information that like states that. You're saying that you're voting based on fact and reason, but you're really voting based on your own anger, which I think is a really salient theme.
Yeah, and also the idea that we've experienced a bunch of times, how we experienced it with Adama as well. And one of the reasons why he goes back is because we're expected to believe that the leaders of these, straggling, scattered to the winds forces of humanity are the ones that are the most logical, right? That put facts above feelings. But time and time again, we see that they do act sometimes instinctually from their emotions. And that's exactly what Ty is proving here with some of his most hypocritical moments.
So eventually they take it to a vote. Celix, Ty, Connor, and Gene Barrelay all vote guilty. But Sam quits. I quit. I quit, Colonel Ty. And so he walks away. And now Connor's like, all right, well, Chief, it's on you. But then Gene Barrelay says, not so fast. We need 6 votes. Them's the rules.
Yeah, and also it has to be unanimous, I believe. It has to be like an actual jury as well.
Yes, has to be unanimous. So no vote. You're going back to camp. No vote tonight.
Wow, is this New Era of Survivor?
It certainly is.
Tyrell played safety without power.
Yo, we're in New Era BSG. We're in Second Exodus, baby. We left New Caprica.
That's the speech, right? Nora Roslin. Oh my God, that's the big twist. Laura Roslin says that they're in a new era now for the show.
Right. Yeah. That's who Nora is.
Oh my God. It was right in front of us the entire time.
It all connects. Okay, so they're going to need to find somebody else. Meanwhile, we get a very quick Adama scene just to check in, a little bit of like people are just like going missing. Both Adama's clearly not into it. They don't know what's going on. Lee says, all right, I got a date with a jump rope. I lost a quarter stone or whatever he says. And what does Bill say? He's like, keep
jumping. Yeah.
God damn it. Don't worry. We'll get out of here, but we're not out of here yet. In the mess hall is the scene where Gata is eating alone and Starbuck sits across from him. And like you've already observed, this is dark. This is dark Starbuck. Like Starbuck has been irascible and mean and drunk and stuff like that in the past. This is like a very, very, very wounded Starbuck coming to a very I don't know how else to describe Gata other than shell shocked. Like he doesn't seem like he's entirely there. He seems like a ghost.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I was trying to get a read for him as well, because again, he doesn't even seem to really put up a fight when his life is on the line. And I wonder how much of a part of him is, you say shell shocked, but I don't know. Maybe I'm reading a bit too much in this character, but how much guilt do you think he's saddled with?
A ton.
Yes, he is someone who was providing a lot of information. Look, I'm going to go so far as to say what Tyrell said of like, he's the reason why we're off this planet, but like he was a big help behind it.
Sure.
At the same time, especially comparing himself to someone like Zarek, who like did make the initiative to say, I do not stand with you guys, Baltar. Like I am being stripped of my rights here. From Gata, I'm sure from a certain perspective, both externally and internally, he's thinking like, well, I was a coward for not like,
Yes.
for keeping my job and sticking with it. I thought I
Yes.
could get more done being the right hand of this guy, but when the left hand is cold and robotic, there's only so much the right can do.
Yes. So I think absolutely all of that
Yeah.
feels totally right to me, that he feels just like supremely fracked up from the entire experience. But like, ask Starbuck to give a shit, right? Like, she was held hostage by a man who convinced her that they had had a child together, who explicitly was telling her the only way you'll be free is if you tell me you love me. Like Leoben went like full incel on Starbuck over the course of, it sounds like, the full 4 months. Like, what she went through was also so specific. So ask her to have any empathy for Gata right now when she can barely have any for herself. It feels like it's, a really combustible situation, which is why, like, I do wish we had gotten to spend more time in New Caprica, but the fact that it happens for us so quickly really opens the door for, now that we're back with the fleet and everything like that, really opens the door to explore what it's like on the other side of that extreme trauma, because extreme trauma can often just like feel so amorphous and like either like ever present or fast. It's just this incredibly hard thing to endure, that I think the other side of it is almost as interesting to dramatize, especially in such confined, close quarters that these characters have, and especially considering that they are still on the run from Cylons. Like, their lives are still in danger. They let their guards down for a year, and they paid for it severely. So we saw the really cool stuff with the Resistance and the really harrowing stuff with the Resistance. But I think what we're seeing with these Resistance fighters and these Resistance survivors, now that we are back up in space, is like, what do you do when like that fight is over and you still have other fights that you have to fight? Hard, very difficult. And I think experiencing all these different characters, different versions of that story, is very instructive, and I think a good thing to be talking through right now.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see the way that we sort of took a look at our characters through the lens of the huge incident that happened in the miniseries, and how, luckily, a lot of our main characters didn't have like direct trauma as a result from that. There wasn't anyone to be like, oh no, I lost my wife in this explosion. Like, by and large, all of the main characters were able to get away, fairly scot-free from a personal tragedy perspective. Ellen was still getting off the planet. Unfortunately, Zach Adama had already passed by that time. To put it so delicately, this time it's personal. It's the fact that it's a little bit of a different Cylon situation. That was really just like a rug pulled out from under you. Huge surprise, but it's sort of done in one fell swoop. This was yet another rug pull, but then it was basically then almost a year later of just like occupation, fascism, authoritarianism, etc. And then at the same time, there are these personal touches. There is the fact that Ty, as you talked about before, lost so much. Starbuck was essentially made this prisoner in this incredibly demented situation. Even people like Tyrell and Anders and Gata had to weigh constantly back and forth every day. Like, okay, is it worth it to let innocent people die at the expense of possibly furthering our cause? You don't just wake up the next day and move on with your life. And that's why I think it is so interesting that even looking at like Adama putting his arm around Ty, it's very clear that this is not the same situation as the first time they took battle stations when the colonies were destroyed. This is the fact that Ty has dealt with so much loss as an example of this. It's not something that you can easily move on from. And I'm glad the characters haven't. And I'm glad the show hasn't as well, because it makes it feel much more realistic. As much as we talk about how BSG is kind of a show that still functions on the week to week, at least in the first 2 seasons, here they are still kind of sitting in it. It's a little bit like going to our beloved Star Trek: The Next Generation. You have the best of both worlds, where Jean-Luc Picard is turned into Locutus of Borg.
Right, sure.
And they're able to move on from it, and you think like, okay, we have this episode Brothers, where Jean-Luc goes to visit his brother in, the Parisian vineyard. This is going to be a nice lark. And it turns out that like in the middle of it, he has this huge mental breakdown. about the fact that he underwent this incredible trauma and nearly destroyed his friends and his family and everything that he cares about and lost control of that situation. And it's those moments that make me so happy that this type of medium does what it does, and also goes to show that as much as we talked about everything has happened before, everything will happen again. This does feel so distinctly different for our characters. Now, look, do I want an entire season of Dark Starbuck and Emo Tai? Not necessarily, but I very much expect and am happy with the fact that we got it in the immediate follow-up to leaving New Caprica.
This show knows its tone. Its tone is that it can be very serious while also occasionally needing to be like very heroic, and also from time to time being pretty funny. It will always have some mixture of those things.
Yeah.
Sometimes, though, it will be darker than it's been, and we're in a really dark time right now. Whether or not this is the darkest, I won't tell you. But this is a really bleak moment for the show. So we got to push through it. And I think you can expect that the show will be able to do it with all of the things that you enjoy about Battlestar Galactica along for the ride. Okay, so Starbuck and Gata kind of have it out. And Celix is like, ooh, now that looks like a potential yes vote. So Starbuck gets recruited to be the latest member of the Circle.
And she's like, great, guilty.
Yes. Yeah, she's like, this isn't legal. Is it legal? And Chief and Ty both say, yeah, it's legal. So are you in or you out? She says, I'm in.
And then Andrew's like, oh, I forgot my keys. What?
Yeah, I know. Starbuck votes Gata is guilty because he saw this list with all these names on it, and it was all people that she really cares about. And how could you look at this and go through with it and not be guilty? So she's a guilty vote. Other votes are coming in, and then Sam comes in, and she's allowed to leave because she's already voted. And Sam tries to like have a moment with her of like, I'm not a part of this because I'm done killing people. I don't want to do this anymore. And this is where Starbuck says, well, I need to do it. And Sam's like, that, well, this isn't the guy who locked you up. She says, well, he'll have to do. Someone has to pay. And so it looks then like such trouble in paradise as to lead to, is this a breakup? Are we on a break?
I think this is like get the divorce proceedings and keep that priest from Laura Roslin getting sworn in, because I think they're on the way to Splitsville right now. And I'll bring in one of the deleted scenes here as well, because it does shed some more light and again makes more explicit the conflict that's going on between the two of them, which is also a bit understandable from my perspective from both of their sides, in that I think Anders was looking for a way to get back to before, right? From his perspective, he is done with the war. He was just looking to, after a guy who's been fighting for like so long, both for his life on New Caprica, on regular Caprica, and then on New Caprica. He's like, get me away from anywhere named Caprica. I just want to settle back with my wife and live happily ever after. And he just cannot meet Starbuck on that level.
Right.
Starbuck is clearly someone that is processing, understandably, a lot of grief and especially a lot of anger.
She wants to hurt someone. She needs to like physically hurt someone. She didn't kill Leoben enough.
Yeah, and so the deleted scene has Sam dropping in on Starbuck, who's kind of like studying the flight logs because he finds out that like she's eager to hop back into a Viper immediately. And he basically tells her in so many words, I'm trying to get out of this war, but it seems like you're trying to get back in it. And Starbuck admits, to your point earlier, I just think someone should pay for what happened to me. And then it also ends things on, again, a fairly ominous note when she's like, this is who I am now, Sam. If you don't like it, then there's the door. You know, sit out the rest of the season like you did those webisodes. And it ends on her trying to reach for his hand, and he like coldly pulls away from her. And it sucks. As much as I have talked about how I never really got this relationship, that it built too fast.
I think that you've come to enjoy Sam though as a character.
A little bit. I mean, this is the most personality we've seen out of him by far in this episode. So he will be getting an MVP point for me, because I also feel bad for him. I feel bad for both of them, but like, to me, it's not like Andrew just coming in being like, buck up, Starbuck, come on, let's just go back to the way things were. You could tell that it's something that he needs, and it's clear that that's not jiving with what she needs in this moment. And so you really can't go back to before. I think that sort of is the lesson here. As much as Laura Roslin wants to espouse, like, we're not going to execute any more people because we want to move forward together as a united species. This really shows how the word new in new normal is like underlined, bolded, and circled.
Yeah. We go back to the council. Ty is, trying to be like, I understand why you don't want to vote yes, Chief. You see Gata as a good guy. A lot of good people had to pay for the choices they made. Ellen collaborated. She had to pay for it.
She gave him the twirl.
Ty might have the line of the episode, actually, when he says, Ellen collaborated. She had to pay for it. And I liked her a hell of a lot more than I like Gata.
There goes my Gata Ty / fan fiction idea.
Very funny. Chief eventually relents and votes guilty. And so eventually they are able to bag Gata up. They bring Gata to the launch pad. Felix asks him if he has any words in his defense. Chief is pleading with Felix. He says, well, listen, but, he sees Starbuck there, and he says, well, what's the point? I already explained it, because he had said all of this stuff to Starbuck. And he says, I won't beg. And then Starbuck goes, kicks him, and says, beg. She insists that he begs. Nothing will stop Starbuck from beating down. I'm going to beat you down, Felix.
I'm going to go over to New Caprica and beat you down.
Beat you down.
Felix Gata, Chief of Staff.
Beat you down.
Wow, what about an Amy O'Hara reference on our BSG podcast?
It was inevitable. We do this long enough. We'll get them all.
The Centurion sounded like friggin' Predator howling in the trees.
We'll catch them all. We got to catch them all by the end of this. And he's like, oh, well, tell him everything that you told me about the messages and the dog bowl. And she's like, dog bowl. And he realizes, like, he doesn't even wait once he, like, puts it together. He's not, like, waiting for a yes from anybody. He just starts, like, cutting the bonds. He's getting Gata back up on his feet. He tells Ty, no one else could have known the things that he just said. That means he was our guy. He was the inside man. He's the only reason we got out of there. And Gata, again, just, like, totally fracked up, totally gone. Just sort of like shoulders hunched, says, I don't know what else I could have done. And he shuffles off, and the rest of the circle leaves as well. And the 3-day timer is up, and Felix Gata has survived.
So, I mean, again, it's tough because this is all colored with the fact that he may not be in the right mental state. Do you think Gata knew who the leaders of the resistance were? Because if you do, then there's no excuse not to say, hey, Tyrell, I was talking with you. Ty, I assume Colonel Ty, you were probably in charge of something that was going on. Here's what you need to know.
Yeah, I think it seemed to me like he knew about Chief at the very least.
Well, yeah, because he's going to, like, run directly to Chief, which is also why, and we talked about this before, like, I was a little surprised that Chief didn't know that Gata was the informant, considering that Gata ran to him directly, and he's like, okay, you sound a lot like my informant who's been leaving me messages next to the dog bowl. I wonder if you're the same person.
Yeah. So he must have known about him, which means he probably knew more. He was very close to Baltar. Who knows what he knew? Ty was certainly suspected to the degree that he was brought in, had his eye carved out, and was basically only released for further surveillance because there was a mole. So it stands to reason that Gata would know. So then we go from that to figuring out how all of this happened in the first place. That it turns out that Zarek authorized this. He says it's fully legal. It's a presidential order. But Adama says your presidency is a farce. And Zarek says, okay, that's fine. But I was able to do something that means the presidency doesn't have to start for Laura with blood on her hands.
Yeah. And he also talked about this idea of, like, essentially, I mean, remember, at the end of the day,
we're not going to do a clown show. We're not going to do a clown show. We're not putting these people on trial. They don't deserve that. They're collaborators. They tried to turn their backs on humanity. They teamed up with the Cylons. They deserve to die, and they deserve to never be thought of again. That's Zarek's position.
And remember that the first time we met Tom Zarek, he was in jail on the Astral Queen because he's an anti-establishment terrorist. Yeah. That he was somebody that was looking to take down the government and the institutions that he felt were unfairly pushing him and other people down. So it does make sense that from his perspective, he feels like the bureaucracy of government would like keep this churning in the works for
in my
months.
opinion, it is the bureaucrats who are evil.
Exactly. For months, if not years. That, to his point, that, okay, well, even if these people do get executed, it puts them in a spotlight where they might be personified as martyrs that could lead to more uprisings of like, well, they actually had points. And so Rosalind, interestingly, like kind of does take points from Zarek here of like, they both, I think, want to proceed with humanity as a unified front. Zarek is trying to do it sort of in the most callous, not James way possible, which is to kind of just get rid of all the sympathizers and then say, all right, everyone left didn't have any relations with the Cylons, so we can move forward hunky-dory. Whereas Rosalind is more so going with the tabula rasa, wash your hands clean method. And so, again, it was a nice reminder that as fun as Richard Hatch is and how, okay, maybe Tom Zarek did turn a new page with his relationship with Rosalind, it is still the same book at the end of the day.
It's the same guy, which is another reason why I like, as we're talking about more and more, I love this episode. And I think that this episode just like really plays the characters that they play in this episode so true to the bone. The ways that they would react to all of these circumstances that they found themselves in are fundamentally who they always fundamentally were. And as you're highlighting here, all of this really tracks neatly with who we know Zarek to be so far. Having said that, by the end of the episode, it wasn't such a party foul that he didn't go through with the turnaround with Rosalind, that she hasn't gone around, and clearly he's still in her inner circle. He's in that front row. He's ultimately applauding as Rosalind announces to the fleet a general pardon. Everyone is pardoned. Clean slate. Tabula rasa. No more missing peaches, though. And says this isn't going to be popular, but this is how we move on. And Zarek even joins in on that. And Rosalind's general pardon, to me, is almost the only thing that's a little out of character for a person who like blew Leoben out the airlock and like ordered mass abortion.
She was pissed off that they were doing her move without crediting it to her.
Sometimes I can't totally track Rosalind politically, but Mary McDonnell is so good that I don't really care all that much.
Well, I think she puts it really well in her speech, which is we all feel the need for justice and we all feel the need for vengeance, and finding the difference between the two can be difficult at times.
Yeah.
And so I think for her, again, it's for a very nuanced character. Sometimes she does kind of have a broad way of proceeding forward when it comes to governing. And again, I think it is, interestingly enough, kind of two sides of the same coin with her and Zarek, where they both wanted the ideal outcome at the end of the day, which is everyone moves forward, one nation under Cylon Frog God. But with Zarek, there was a lot more bloodletting, whereas for Rosalind, it's a lot more turning the other cheek. And I guess from her perspective, maybe it's also the fact that like she had this relationship with Baby Boomer as well. I mean, we could also headcanon a bit that like, is she feeling guilty about losing the baby? And like she said, okay, I meddled in human Cylon affairs beforehand. Who am I to necessarily continue to stand on my moral high horse and judge people because of that? You know, she kind of comes and fits and starts here. It's definitely more than what we've seen of Laura Rosalind in the past 4 episodes. But I think there is a way you could talk around it, even if it is, to your point, taking a very broad brush approach to something that has been personified over this episode as incredibly nuanced.
Ty recently, to her face, called her naive, right? Like, he's like, you know, and so like you could imagine maybe what his review of this political move might be. But I think like naive is one way to look at Laura Rosalind. I think another way to look at her is optimistic, and she is a believer. Certainly religiously, and I think she's a believer fundamentally in the remainder of humankind, and she has to believe in her ability to protect these people. And I do think even pragmatically, as I'm talking myself into like understanding her through line here, I actually do think it's very clear, and I'm an idiot for not seeing it faster, is that she's also basically making a pragmatic choice. She's making the same decision that Zarek basically made. Zarek's decision was like, kill them and do it quietly so that no one ever finds out about it. And Rosalind's like, well, how about we don't kill them and we just quietly do away with the crime? And that way we give them a chance. Our dwindling numbers don't have to dwindle any more than they had to before. And we get back to work. Can we do that instead? And like, there are people who would find that to be a disastrous, decision, whether that's politically or like tangibly, like tangible results of that are going to be terrifying. But Rosalind is a believer in people and a believer in the fleet above all.
Then that's the major thing for me is that we also need to look at it from the perspective of these people have just lived under Cylon occupancy and the presidency or lack thereof of Gaius Baltar. This is the first thing she is doing back as president. It needs to be a message that conveys unity and hope as well. That it's not necessarily going to be like, yup, it's out of the frying pan and into the fire. I'm gonna, good news, you're out of the Cylon camps where they execute you at whim. That being said, let me execute all these other people at my whim. I think it's her really representing, again, turning this new page to a new chapter, to a new era, saying, we are not the Cylons, and I'm going to prove that by doing like the one thing that Cylons couldn't do back then, which is show you mercy.
Episode ends with Chief deciding to eat at Felix Gaeta's lonely lunch table, and it's a very sweet ending. Chief and Gaeta aren't exactly like talking or even really like looking at each other eye to eye, but they are next to each other. They are eating at the same table. They're still, however, whatever happened between them, however much they disagreed with each other, all of these things, they are still in the same fleet and have to share the space. And Chief at least makes the move to decide, I will sit with this person.
And we're
a nice button on the episode, I think.
Yeah, and we're treated to a BSG Classic 10 this as well over Laura Roslind's speech. We get a montage checking in with like various characters and where they are. Starbuck, we didn't mention this, but during the breakup with Sam, basically Anders points out like, hey, remember when you gave me your dog tags as a promise that you'd always come back for me, as sort of a symbolic and romantic gesture or lack thereof. He ends up giving the dog tags back to her, and she kind of just stares at them in the locker before moving on. Speaking of moving on, or maybe not so much, like Ty still puts away Ellen's things as if she was still living there, which is certainly something that I know does get talked about from a realistic perspective in terms of like widowers and widows kind of moving on from their respective spousal losses. We'll talk about this. Baltar finally gets a pair of clothes, which we'll get into with the other storyline. And I say it because Gaeta is back in uniform again by the end of this. Now, I don't know if they're going to put him in the CIC or maybe they'll like alternate shifts between him and Ty at the end of the day, but it seems like truly in accordance with this new clemency, with this forgiveness program, Gaeta is back doing what he does.
Who knows what the future holds, but Felix Gaeta did not get blown out the airlock at the end of this episode. So here he is in uniform. I think you could imagine you'll see him in uniform again. The other major storyline of the episode that we haven't talked about at all is Gaius Baltar's new home. He lives on a base star, a Cylon base star. Just to quickly recap,
who lives on a spaceship in the middle of space? Gaius Baltar.
Just to go through it very quickly, he has an insane dream where he and Laura Roslin make out. And which apparently was a ridiculous scene to film. According to the Galacticast, as you can imagine. He wakes up, he's naked, he's like in I think it's the desert palace in Final Fantasy IX that Kuja locks everybody up in. He's like there. There's like the weird little red bed, like the red velvet crystalline.
There's like a weird he's given like the rest of the environment is completely sterile to the point that there's no filters on the lights. It's bright white spotlights all shining on him with like one odd red bar circulating around the room. And then there's this red fainting couch and a side table and a glass. Yeah. And that's all that Gaius Baltar has. And like one pervy Centurion standing in the corner watching him at all times.
Yeah. Deanna also watching him. Deanna, maybe wanting to do more than watch him. She's like kind of giving him the eyes. And she gives him a bottle of pills at one point, and she like touches his hand a little bit extra. A little extra hand touch, Mike. Did you clock that?
I didn't, but that's interesting if we get a whole Cylon love triangle. Because what's interesting is Deanna basically catches Baltar and us up on what's been going on. It's been 3 days. Baltar has been knocked out since then. And fittingly enough, as the humans have talked about whether or not to get rid of their sympathizers, such is the case with the Cylons. You know, Baltar happened to be, which maybe I did clock initially that was probably a dream sequence, considering that, like, okay, A, how would Baltar have made it back onto Colonial One without getting his head pulled off of his body? B, in that situation, why would Laura Roslin be sitting at the president's desk? Because Gaius Baltar was still technically the president. But interestingly enough, the Cylons have held a vote to try to see if they want to get rid of Baltar or not. It is 3 versus 3, with the decision lying with the Sixes. There's no unanimous vote here. It's majority only. And to your point, it seems like maybe Deanna was a vote to keep him. Maybe.
I mean, how would you guess the votes broke down?
All right, so I think that Cavill voted no. Voted kill. I think Cavill is, again, the bloodthirsty prison overlords. Like, they don't care. It's just another meat bag. I would say maybe the Dorals voted no. The Dorals didn't seem to like Gaius Baltar.
He held a gun to Gaius's head.
Yeah, he lost a lot of patience with him. I think Boomer does vote to keep him. It's clear that Boomer obviously is probably the most human sympathetic out of all of them, given her history. And so I think also they had their own connection, despite the fact that he did talk her into trying to kill herself at the end of season 1, if you remember that moment. So
I do.
But I do think she would vote to keep him alive because, like, he's also valuable intel. I think Deanna would vote to keep him. I mean, what's interesting is you think about it. I mean, he does help her find the baby, which was apparently this, like, fundamental turning point.
That's what he says, right? It's like, I hope you find the baby.
Yeah, so, like, maybe that's why she has such an attachment to him. I guess by default, Simon is also a yes.
It's Simon or Leoben. Which one do you think?
Oh, well, Leoben loves love, so he's going to vote yes.
Yeah. He's also, like, he loves chaos. I think, like, Simon logically would be like, yeah, no extra value, just kill him.
Yeah, well, and also, Leoben also has a fascination with humans, too, remember? And so, like, I think he would want to keep him alive, even as his own demented plaything. And so it falls onto the Sixes, and it's a little bit of trouble in paradise over here as well, in that, like, Caprica 6 is clearly in her feels. Remember that them going to New Caprica in the first place was partially her idea alongside Boomer, and it all quite literally went up in smoke, and she's very much stewing about the fact that it was all this big abject failure. And she says that she basically did this all because of her feelings for him. And so as a natural result of it all blowing up in her face, she has to wonder, is it all worth it at this point?
Yeah. There's a scene with Baltar and Six. He tries to convince her, "You love me," and eventually she just kind of walks away. But then
he follows it up by being like, "And I love you. I need you too."
And she does leave him with some clothes. So clearly he is not being executed. So his life is spared.
Yeah.
As well.
I think this is going to be where we're going to get Baltar for the next foreseeable little while. I think we're going to have him trapped in this prison cell. There might be some time where he is, like, eventually allowed out on a leash.
Yeah.
Maybe when the Cylons plan their eventual next attack, they bring him in for some intel. But I think we're going to get used to that fainting couch, Josh. I think James Callis is going to get bed sores from sitting on that for the next, like, 2 or 3 episodes.
Do you like that?
No. I mean,
why not?
I mean, maybe. I mean, I think Gaius Baltar being trapped in a prison in his own mind is a very fun idea, considering that we get some nice quips out of him. But at the same time, haven't we already kind of experienced the character being in a prison in his own mind over the past 2.5 seasons?
He's on a Cylon base star right now, and he's got that red fainting couch. Isn't that interesting?
No, I want to see more of the Cylon base star. I want him to have free reign. I want to see how the other half lives.
Okay. That could be fun.
Could be fun. I want to see it. I would like to see it.
All right. MVPs and LVPs for this week. Mike, you've got 3 MVPs. I've got 2. I see we're doubled up on 1. The aforementioned Sam Anders, who you had said that you would give a point to.
Yeah, mainly because, I mean, for 2 reasons. Like, I've talked about this before. I don't ascribe sympathy as a primary reason why I give MVP points, except for the Stewarts in Raised by Another, the adopted family that nearly got Aaron. But at the same time, Anders does seem to be the one, and as much as Gata's, like, doing the, trying to bring it down from inside. What else could I do? Sam does pull a bit of the Tom Zarek of yore by being like, nah, I can't do this. The war is over. I'm still fighting this war if I'm making more people die at my behest. So I'm out at this point. And also, I wouldn't say good for him for like helping facilitate the break between him and Starbuck, but he does heed her warning where she basically tells him like, listen, I'm a wounded animal and I'm going to claw at the thing that's closest to me. And in that case, that's you. So it's as tough as it is for him, he does make, I think, what's the right decision for both characters and decides to pull away here.
I saw that you with your second MVP point, you put Chief down, which I might have done, but seeing that you had Chief on there, I put Saul because I really think that like this next step for those three characters from the previous 4 episodes to here is really deft, and I think that they just did such a great job of exploring those men, those people, and so it's a storytelling point and an acting point, if nothing else.
Yeah, I mean, I did not like Ty in this episode. I was actually debating giving him an LVP point just because he was like so irascible, especially in the CIC. But the way he explains it from his perspective, as well as what we reason with him, I think it does make sense. Or at least like the way he's coming. And he does have this moment with Connor, at least, where he's out like, we're not bloodthirsty killers. We have methods, even if that is incredibly hypocritical on his part.
Yes. Your final MVP point to Rosalind.
Yeah, I mean, Rosalind's able to shut this shit down, when it gets presented to her. Again, we've talked about, I think, a lot of the pragmatic reasons that she takes to move forward with this. And I think it is the message she needs to put forward at this, second term in her administration, and also a way to move forward from this incredibly traumatizing set of incidents as humanity. So I think it was a very good episode for her. Best, I think, by default episode for her of the season so far. And she winds up as president, back where she wanted to be in the first place.
Yeah, yes, that's great. Her vice president gets an LVP point from Mike.
Yeah, because here's the thing. Like, he tries to do things the Tom Zarek way, but, like, at the end of the day, it got Jammer executed, but, like, what does he have to show for it? And he's no longer president, too. And now he's in the doghouse, and he might be given the full, like, Julia Louis-Dreyfus from Veep treatment, where he's basically that in name only and has been, like, relegated to appearances at ice cream parlors, and that's it. So
pretty good gig.
I mean, nice work if you can get it, but I think Zarek, who wanted more power and was the reason why he wanted to be vice president in the first place, might be living out his worst nightmare if he is a bit of an empty figure here. So yeah, due to the fact that he gets caught red-handed and basically has everything pivot away from what he does, he gets an LVP point here.
Your final LVP point aligns nicely with the rest of mine, frankly. We basically are getting everybody in the Jammer death sequence who isn't a main character. Jammer dies, so I LVP'd him. You got Connor, despite the incredible revelation that Ryan Robbins is like the glue that has held this whole thing together.
Unless it's the big twist that Connor like falls through a wormhole and winds up many, many years in the past, and for some reason doesn't have the wherewithal to warn anyone about what's going to happen, and instead just decides to become the armistice officer.
Who can say? TBD. Then I gave my other ones to Jean Barrelet and Celix.
I guarantee 3 weeks from now, we're going to see the name Jean Barrelet on the LVP list.
I want to know. Yeah.
Who is this?
Yes. I think 3 weeks from now, we'll still have it. And I think if we continuously remember, of course, to just like say Jean Barrelet on every episode of the podcast, we'll never forget. But I almost already forgot. Wait, is Celix the pyramid player? No, it's Jean Barrelet. So like it is precipice. It's hard to say.
No, yeah, Celix was the one that was on Cobalt, right?
Sure, yeah.
I think you had said that she appeared not only earlier this season, but in season 2 as well.
I believe that's correct.
I mean, I keep mixing her up with Neelix from Star Trek Voyager, and so I'm just waiting for her to start cooking something up. But the only thing she's cooking up is executions at this point.
LVP points, baby. The Cylon versus the Fleet. Who won this week?
I'm going to say the Fleet.
Okay.
I know that initially the message was to like get rid of all the Cylon sympathizers, and that on paper should like sow discord that someone like Data is kept alive. But I think Laura Roslind's message and the fact that it seems like people are moving forward just in general shows to me like the Fleet is on the rise, as opposed to the Cylons, who are in comparison just kind of like stuck still in the middle of space with Gaius Baltar on a fainting couch.
Okay, so that means the fleet is up 3-2. No ties this season yet. 18-11 overall, with 7 overall Colonel ties across the whole series at this point. Let's rate each episode on a scale of 0 to 4.2. Battle stars, I give a score. Mike gives a score. We would love to hear the scores from you if you want to write in. Down the hatch, rhap@gmail.com. Mike, I was a little lower than I ultimately went heading into this episode, but I think talking it through, there's just so much here that I figured, why the frack not? And I boosted collaborators up to a perfect 4.2.
Ooh, I might be with you there eventually. I put it at 4.1 right now just because it's tough to follow up Exodus in so many ways. And like, I talk about this a lot with Lost, that I think for 4.2, it has to contain at least one like capital I iconic scene. And I don't know if we necessarily got that in this episode, but I think when I compare it, especially to more episodes in season 3, I would not be surprised if I bump it up. I think this was really anything and everything you could want from a follow-up to all of the emotional trauma and physical trauma that was experienced on New Caprica. I am so glad, again, that we sat in this before we assumingly move on next week back to our usual scheduled program. I think, to your point, this is when we get some of my favorite stuff in BSG, which is kind of like these ensemble-like episodes where there is like one central thing and it's all about how each one of our characters interact with it in their own separate ways. And we get that here with the idea of the circle and how do you deal with people amongst your ranks who were consorting with the enemy in some way, shape, or form. Every character responded in a way that felt wholly them and wholly with the themes of the show. And it also made for, in my opinion, a very satisfying outcome. I would say maybe what brings it down a little bit is the Baltar Cylon stuff, which is like more nothing burgery to me, definitely more setup. But at least from a visual perspective, is appealing for what might happen next. But everything going on the Big G, c'est magnifique. That was fantastic.
The Baltar stuff could have had nothing else other than the dream sequence in which he starts to make out with Laura Roslin, and I would have called it perfect Baltar content. So I think that to me is like kind of like a little bit of a wow, Battlestar, what are you doing type of moment. But yeah, it's great. It's such a good episode. Collaborators is an amazing title for it. Of course, they're trying to suss out and deal with the collaborators, the humans that collaborated with the Cylons, while also having to live with the fact that in our continued effort to survive and, you know, stay ahead of the Cylons, we are colleagues, we are collaborators with one another.
Yeah.
And so how do we find the line between those two things? So a tremendous episode of the show. I think my thinking right now is we're in season 3 at this point. I'm just going to 4.2 label an episode that I feel like really hit me in the spot. You know, Exodus, I think, is like the cleaner, like, oh my God, holy shit episode for sure. I think Collaborators on an emotional level hits just as hard. So
yeah, I would not be surprised if I come back to this episode at the end of the season and it ends up becoming my favorite. Which I talked about how like Flesh and Bone maybe it holds a special place in my heart more so than the finale, just because again what they're able to accomplish in one episode on a very different scale than Exodus was very, very superb.
Yeah, I just want to mark it for now because I think like this is an episode that deserves to be talked about as like, you know, among the greatest of the greats of Battlestar Galactica.
Oh yeah.
Anything big from the deleted scenes?
So the other one besides the like extended, you know, beginning of the end for Anders and Starbuck is that we talked about this last week, but there's like almost a deleted scene that's separate from the deleted scenes that were on, I think, like the DVD and Blu-ray, according to Ben, that had basically just a continuation of Lee being demoted, that like obviously now the ship's overcrowded. So it's like, okay, Lee, where are you going to stay now that you don't have commander headquarters anymore? And so now he's been bumped back down to major. And Lee makes a quip of like, oh, can I have one of your old uniforms? I think we're the same size.
Got it. Okay. All right. Well, didn't miss much, I don't think. No jumps to add to the jump count. Only 4 fracks to add. 2 from.
Luckily, we have a little bit of like a refraction period while we're still recovered from that incredible jump last week.
1 frack from Starbuck, 1 frack from Sam, 2 fracks from Connor. 1 for Connor and 1 for the armistice officer from Ryan Robbins.
1 per role that he's played on Battlestar Galactica.
That's it. Mike, you have predicted that Starbuck and Apollo would frack within 41 episodes. The countdown is on 38 episodes down.
There's an important step forward.
You have
here.
a very, very small window here.
I know. I'm Luke firing.
You are
the
Luke
1 in a million.
Skywalker. You're flying blind. You've got a 1 in a million chance here. What do you think?
Well, so one half of the equation is certainly set up. Now, look, is Starbuck in a great place for this? No. Was she in a great place when she was imagining it happening with Lee, or the fact that when she nearly did it with Lee last season? No. Yeah. So I don't think that's going to necessarily stop things. I think we need to check in on the Lee and D side of things and see if there's perhaps trouble in paradise there. I mean, what's interesting is, and maybe this is something we'll get in a future episode, we have yet to find out what happened between Lee and Starbuck. Yep. Right? There was that thing that when we did the time jump, it was like Starbuck needed supplies and they were saying, oh, well, you could talk to Lee. And she's like, oh, he would never talk to me. We still don't know exactly what happened in that interim year with the settling of New Caprica that caused the two of them to fall out. I think it's inevitably going to happen, complete with flashbacks. Maybe it'll happen in the next 3 episodes. We shall see.
Okay. Any changes with the Cylons? I don't think so.
No, we barely saw any of them. Yeah. But I wouldn't bump Aaron Doral up or down based on his appearance in the webisodes.
Fair enough. Okay, that does it. Next week, Nothing's Right. I'm Torn is the name of the episode, directed by Natalie Imbruglia herself. Season 3, episode 6, Torn, coming next week. Predictions, Mike?
Well, I think someone will be cold and shamed laying naked on the floor.
That's right.
I mean, that is kind of the way Baltar wakes up, so I would not be surprised. So there is one beat that we haven't really followed up on, and 2 characters, or at least one that was conspicuously absent in this episode, which is Baby Boomer. Okay. Especially after she does this big rendezvous mission and helps, and especially
probably the Natalie Imbruglia of Battlestar Galactica.
Oh, I mean, there's just so many choices, but yeah, sure. I'll have to really think on who's the Natalie Imbruglia. What do you think? 3 a.m. Who's up at 3 a.m.?
I think I could map most of these characters onto 90s musicians.
All right, we'll save that for next time. Okay. Next set of webisodes. But I think, because remember where we left Baby Boomer, right? Deanna had told her that the baby was not dead. And despite the fact that Boomer, shot her in the leg, said Adama would never lie to me, I think she is going to easily pull on that thread now that things have settled down. So I imagine that's where we're going in the next episode, is the mystery of where is Hera. I think that also might hopefully pan out to the rest of the Cylon base star, as well as we get to see, obviously, the Cylons took her too. That's where I'm imagining we go next, is to follow up on the one plot point that was left kind of by the wayside in this perfect episode.
Okay, so let's see if we follow up with any of that next week. Torn coming next on Down the Hatch. Make sure you are subscribed. Search for Battlestar Galactica Down the Hatch wherever you get your podcasts. You can send in feedback. Down the Hatch, RHAP@gmail.com. You can watch episodes of Down the Hatch on the We Know Scripted TV YouTube page. Just search for RHAP We Know Scripted TV, and you will find us doing lots of great work on WeKnowScriptedTV.com. Mike is talking about Silo Season 2.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking Dune. So we've got some really fun sci-fi stuff for you right now. So make sure you are subscribed to that feed. WeKnowScriptedTV.com will get you all of that information. Huge shouts to our team behind the curtain, Ben, Brendan, Operation Mattingly, for making this podcast possible, shipping all the relevant information through the pneumatic tubes and into your podcast feeds.
Operation Mattingly was the original Circle.
I think that's right. That's what they were originally called. Our Operation Mattingly operates like an execution squad as well, in ways that we are not able to talk about publicly on the podcast.
No, this is all under the table. One other thing I'd like to plug is, hey, if you want to hear me talk about guys named Saul who provide funny quips and can sometimes get very angry, you want to check out my Survivor stuff from this past week.
Incredible segue. Perfect. Say no more, say less. Incredible. You can follow Mike Bloom at a Mike Bloom type. He's on the Blue Sky. I'm at Round Howard, also on the Blue Sky. Make sure you're on the Blue Sky. It's a good, friendly place. We would love to see you there. Happy to interact. Just give us an @. We will talk back. At Round Howard, at a Mike Bloom type. Mike, I'm torn. I don't want to end the podcast.
I know, but we'll stitch ourselves back together next week. Because listen, it's going to be, I said it was a tough fact to follow last week, and they followed it up with something incredible. So this is an even tougher act.
Something's got to give eventually. So let's see if it's torn. All right, Mike, we'll do that next week. Until then, everybody, take care. Bye-bye.